Hello, and welcome to this session about the ISO 19650 framework and ProjectWise. I hope that we can achieve one of two outcomes for you today. Either to reinforce your opinions about good information management, or to open your eyes to the value that we can bring to you and your organization by the use of ProjectWise with the ISO framework. At first glance, you might think that it's just lots of unnecessary extra work for your project teams. But the thousands of people who use ProjectWise along with the ISO 19650 framework every day are very well aware of the tangible benefits that you can realize when you employ this system on your projects. If we look at an example such as TIPSA, one of our user organizations in Spain, they've not only adopted ProjectWise with the ISO framework off the back of projects where they've worked with ProjectWise in the past, they've also achieved official ISO certification, which I think says a lot about how much they value the system and the benefits that brings to their business. And it's these benefits that we'll focus on for this session. It's not just about ticking a compliance box. It's about improving information management practices to save time and increase profit. I will talk about the big picture, but also some of the detail, the small improvements that add up to surprising savings. When you decide to go down this road, it's important to remember that there are three vital ingredients for success. These are technology, process, and people. In this case, Bentley brings the technology, and the process is provided by the ISO framework. And the final part is up to you. To deploy this successfully requires some willingness to change how we work. Normally, we're not talking about a dramatic change, but it's important to be aware of this and to plan accordingly. The end result is worth the extra effort. For example, it might seem an onerous task to create a document code for every single document you create, but the downstream benefits of having a universal document code that everyone can understand and find easily far outweighs the 30 seconds spent creating that document in the correct manner. Having said all that, we'll get into the presentation, we'll introduce the concept to you and go into some of the steps along the way. After the presentation, there will be a Q&A session where you'll get the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. ProjectWise is the only engineering document management system that uses a workflow rules engine to enforce the ISO 19650 standard on your projects. We're going to look at the out-of-the-box framework. Your configuration might differ slightly, but the overall concepts are the same. I'd like to discuss why it's important that we follow this methodology. If we follow the requirements set out in the ISO framework, and apply them to ProjectWise, this enables you to comply with the standard in a simple and easy to understand way. Let's look at the concept of the ISO 19650 standard and how we apply that concept to ProjectWise. Now, this diagram sets out the four main work stages for the majority of documents. Every time we create a document, it must start as a work in progress document with the suitability code of S0 and revision version of P01.01. ProjectWise will help you to create the document with the correct code, and you can work then in the normal way with your chosen application. When the document is ready, the user will choose to change the status of the document from work in progress to content check. At this point, the document is checked by the relevant person or via an automated process if that's enabled for the project. If it's rejected, ProjectWise will manage the increase in minor revision and release it back to the work in progress user. At this point, the process starts again. We make the changes, go through the checking phase, and eventually get to a shared document. Once the document is shared, it has a different suitability code, it loses the minor revision, and it's then available for other people on the project to see and use for coordination. We can revise a document from shared, and ProjectWise will increase the major revision. In this case, we will go to P02, and again, the process starts over. From shared, the next stage is published, at which point it's a contractual document. And finally, we might use an archived stage once the project is finished. Archived state is also used for previous versions of documents. These are called superseded documents, and they allow us to understand the progression of a document and to revert back to an older version if needed. Next, we'll look at how we use these steps within the ProjectWise environment. Firstly, let's have a look at the ProjectWise Explorer interface on a data source that has work areas with the ISO 19650 framework implemented on it. So this is my demo data source, and within here I've got a folder for projects, and there is my work area. And if I expand that, we have a standard folder structure. And what we can see here is some folders for deliverables management. So these are storage area and transmittal responses, and then location 1. And if I expand the location 1 folder, we'll see the discipline folders. So within a work area, you may have multiple locations, and each of those locations would have the discipline folders within them. And within each discipline folder, we have a number of folders for different document types. What you see on your system might be slightly different to this, but in principle, it's the same. There's two main reasons for setting up the folder structure in this way. Firstly, it's easy to navigate for you as the user. You'll be able to find your discipline within your area of the project easily, and you can see where you need to create specific types of documents. It also helps ProjectWise to apply the correct permissions based on role and workflow state. As an architect, I can go into one of these folders and I can create documents in here, and I can edit documents in here. But if I was to go into another discipline folder, I wouldn't be able to see any work in progress documents. I wouldn't be allowed to create any documents, and I wouldn't be able to move any documents through the workflow. In fact, the only thing I can see in another discipline is documents that have reached shared or published workflow state. Now, the view I've created here is giving me some information that's useful when we're looking at an ISO framework system. So I can see the revision and version, I can see the suitability code, the document status, and the description, which is often useful. Now let's look at a document and its attributes. So if I press spacebar to open up the properties dialog box, bring that across, we have the standard attribute layout under the General tab. And if I go to the Attributes tab, we can now see specific attributes for this environment. And these first 6 items make up the document code, and we'll look at the document code in the next part. We also then have a requirement for a title, revision note, scale, and sheet size. The revision and version is managed automatically, and when you create a document, it has the initial suitability of S0 for a work in progress document, which we would need to select a new suitability code at a later stage. Also here, we're recording information such as who's drawn or who's created the file, who's checked it, who's approved it, and who's authorized it. Also, if it gets rejected, it will put the name of the person who's rejected it in that box. And then all of this information is recorded in the audit trail. The exact look and feel of this will vary from organization to organization, and even possibly project to project. So although this is the standard framework attribute layout, yours might vary slightly, but the principles are the same. Next, let's look at the document creation wizard, another key part of the ISO 19650 framework. So I can drag and drop files or multiple files from my local machine into ProjectWise if I have some that I need to copy in, and that will invoke the wizard. The other way to use the wizard is to right-click, go to New, Document, and this is the wizard. So if we step through this, firstly, we're going to be asked which folder would we like to create the document in. This is the folder I've chosen. I can change it here if I need to. Next, it's asking me for a template. So you may have templates in a folder for seed files or template files, so you can use one of those. If you've used it before, you'd see it in the recent list. So I'm going to use this DGN as my template, and then I'm going to fill out these details as necessary. So choose your originator code. Again, your list will differ to mine here. Choose the appropriate code. Next, choose the zone or asset from the drop-down list. I don't actually have any information in here, so I'll choose 00, and then level or location. So I'm going to choose ZZ here for multiple levels. M3 is the code for 3D model, so that is fixed because of the folder that we've created the document in. And A is the code for architect for the role. And again, that's fixed because we created it within this architect folder. Next, we click generate, and this gives us the next available number that hasn't been used before. So that happens to be 19 because I've already got 1 to 18 created in that folder. And we go to next. We might want to change the description and call this concept design. We don't need to fill in a version here because we're using the rules engine, which supersedes the ProjectWise versioning system. So just leave that blank. And then we're presented with this attribute page. At this point, I don't have to fill in anything, but these are required fields, and the requirements are not enforced until we move away from work in progress. So you could skip past this page and then fill out those attributes later on. It would be recommended to fill them out now if possible. So I'm going to put a title, a scale, and a sheet size. And I will leave the revision note just so I can show you what happens if we don't fill out all of the required information. And this information is really important so that we have integrity within all of the documents in the system. We go to next and next. And this is just a sort of checking page to show us all of the settings that we've set. And then it will create our document. So there's my newly created document, work in progress, suitability of S0 and revision P01.01. So from here, I can double click, open up the file in its native application and start to work. Now that we've created our document, we want to work with it. So I'm going to open it up. And this process is the same as any normal ProjectWise operation. We double click and it opens in whatever the native application is. In this case, we're opening Open Buildings Designer. So it's checked out the document, and now we can begin to do our work. If I want to reference in a file, the process is the same as normal with ProjectWise. We have ProjectWise integrated into the reference manager, and the difference really here is when I go to attach a reference, I go through my folder structure, and if I wanted to reference in a structural file, as a member of the architect discipline group, when I look into the structural folder, all I will see are documents that have reached a shared status. If we look into the same folder from a structural user point of view, they would see all the documents that exist in there, regardless of their workflow state. Bring that in, and then just reference the file in the normal manner. Now, when I finish my work, I can just close the file normally, and ProjectWise prompts me to check the file in, so I'll do that. Now we can see our file with the reference structural document there as well in the dependency viewer. And the next thing I need to do is to move this status from work in progress through to the checking stage. So if I right click on the document, go to change state down on the bottom here and click on approve. Again, the options you see here may be slightly different, but you should have some kind of approve and reject options. So if I click approve, it's going to ask me if I want to approve for checking. So I say yes, and it's flagged up an error. So the error is saying to me, the revision note attribute cannot be empty. So this is the rules engine doing its job, and as I'm trying to push the document through the workflow, it's doing the checks for me that I need to be done. So what I need to do here is to reopen the properties dialog, go to the attributes page, and I need to set a value for revision note. So I'm going to save that. And I'm going to leave this on the side just so we can see what it's doing as we go through the workflow stages. So I'll right click again, change state, approve. So now we can see this has gone to content check, it's passed all of the checks for the required fields, and it's printed my name here. Normally, as a work in progress user, this document would now become read-only. So that's due to permissions within the workflow. So typically a checker would be able to edit, but the drafter, technician, designer would only see this as read-only at this point. So now if I play the role of the checker, I can open the document up, make sure it's okay, and if I'm happy with it, push it to the next stage. So change state and approve again. Now we're at the final work in progress stage. The revision of version is still the initial version, suitability is still S0, but our status is approved for sharing. So from here we've got two options. We can either revise or we can go ahead to shared. So if I was to revise this document, because I've found a problem with it, I go change state and reject. And we could do this at the checking stage as well, and it has the same effect. So I'll show you what happens. We get a dialog box that asks us, do you want to reject and increase the minor version? So say yes. And ProjectWise will automatically move this back to work in progress. It increases the minor version. It strips out my name from drawn and checked, and it puts my name into the rejected, revised by box. Okay, and then the process repeats. So the designer would go back and revise the design. And again, when they're happy, we just repeat the process of pushing through to checking. We might change the revision note at this stage. Be sure to save your changes if you make any changes to the attributes in here. And content check is good, so we're going to go to approve for sharing. Okay. Now, while I'm doing this, all of these changes are being recorded in the audit trail. And then if we want to go to shared, it's going to ask me, have you selected a design status with a value other than S0? It's not possible to get to shared without selecting a suitability code for the shared state. Okay, so if I press yes here and go ahead, then it's going to fail. So I'm going to press no, and I'm going to go make a change here. And your choice of suitability codes, again, may vary from this, but typically you'd see S1, S3, and maybe some other ones as well. So I'm going to choose S1, so it's a suitable for coordination document. And then I'm going to change state and set to shared. Again, at this point, the rules engine is checking that we filled in everything correctly, and it can go through to the shared state. So only at this point will other disciplines be able to see and use this document. They'll never be able to edit it, but they can now use it in reference for their own coordination. Before we move on, there's a few important points to note. Firstly, there is a reference check when we leave WIP and go to the shared state. So this reference check will not allow a document to reach the shared state if it has references that are still in work in progress. This means that all references must be at shared state or higher. This removes the risk of a design being based upon non-approved information. This is easily resolved by looking at the dependency viewer to find out whose drawing is causing the problem. And I'd also like to show you how the view of available documents will differ depending on your role. Here we're looking at the architect's view of the architect discipline folder. They can see all the documents that exist within that area. Now, if we bring in the view of the same folder, but logged in as a different user, so we're not a member of the architect discipline, and we look inside the architect model folder, all we see are documents that have gone beyond the WIP stage. So some are superseded, and we've also got that shared document that we've just been working on and we've just approved. This demonstrates how the technical capabilities of ProjectWise are put to use in an effective, robust manner to satisfy the procedural requirements of the ISO 19650 standard. As well as the document attributes, there's also an attribute page that shows the revision history. This records all revision notes, along with who made the revision and when. This data, like any ProjectWise data, can be automatically pushed into the drawing's title block and gives a useful audit trail. But let's get back to the story. The next step on from here is approve for publication. And also, I should have mentioned, you'll notice here that ProjectWise has removed the minor versions, so it's P01. At this point, if we reject the document, it will go back to work in progress as P02.01. So ProjectWise will manage your versions and your revisions regardless of how many there are. That's all done automatically. And then the next stage on from here is to choose a suitability code for published. So we might say this is a fit for construction. Chosen approve contractual in this case, because when we get through to a published document, that is a contractual document. So that's the workflow process. The only other thing to talk about now is the dashboards. One benefit of using this system is it makes reporting really easy because we're collecting a lot of information about each of the documents. We know when they were created, we know what their workflow state is, so we can map their progression over time. So here we're looking at the dashboard solution, which we call ProjectWise Project Insights, and this automatically harvests data from the work area and displays it in a graphical format. So here we can see there are 68 documents currently in work in progress, and we can drill through to a list of the documents to see exactly what they are. Next, I'm going to look at a custom dashboard that I've created, which is called the decomposition tree. So it is possible to take the existing dashboards and edit them, and also to create new tabs with more relevant information for your project. I've taken all of the values out of the tree just for demonstration. So it's showing us the total document count for that work area, and then we can break it down. I've chosen to break it down by discipline, so we can see the number of documents in each discipline, and then we can continue to subdivide the data based on the attributes that I've chosen. So we can see there are 7 documents, they're all in work in progress. There's 3 models and 4 drawings, and if we look within the drawings, we can see who's created those, who the designer is assigned to each of those, and who the approver was for those given documents. So this is a nice, flexible, dynamic solution for interrogating your project progress. If we look at the discipline tab, we can see, again, number of documents over time divided by workflow state, and in this example, split into the 4 most used disciplines. We can also see then on other tabs the documents divided by suitability and documents approval trend over time. So with this, we will be able to flag if no documents are being created, then the work in progress line would plateau. What we should see is it increasing over time, then eventually decreasing as documents become approved and shared. That's the end of the presentation. I hope you found it interesting and now have a better understanding of why ProjectWise is the ideal solution to meet your information requirement needs within the context of the ISO 19650 framework. We will now open the floor for questions. Thank you.